President Trump signed a funding bill to keep the government running for the next 6 months, so we got that going for us. Joining us now with more on the budget, tariffs, and taxes, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Little did they know back in 1980 that we'd still be using, we got that going for us, which is nice. It's a Caddyshack reference. I still use it a lot. To talk about tariffs, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. Do you want to know the proper way to do it? Are you open to suggestions, Kevin?
You know, from you always, I think the president has a pretty good idea what he's going to do. We've been talking about it all week, but I'd love to hear your advice. Go for it, Joe.
USMCA compliant stuff, don't do it. I don't think we are right now. If we can determine that it's going to be counterproductive to some of our great companies here, and we don't really know what the end site is, for example, fentanyl in Canada and the effect it would have on the automakers. If we know that it's going to cost them billions of dollars to comply with something based on something that's not related at all to the trade, then don't do it. Do all the reciprocal stuff, because here's a chart that I'm going to bring up for you, Kevin, that shows, for those that don't know, we still are like sort of patsies for the rest of the world. I think we got this. I don't know if you've seen it. You got a monitor there? I don't. Maybe you don't have.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Oh, you can?
I sure can. Yeah.
What's going on there? I mean, what?
You got an excellent team.
Huh?
Yeah. Look at that.
And maybe you can help us. On the light blue are things that basically accomplish the same thing but aren't de facto tariffs. What is that, like VATs, and what other protectionist policies are included there?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's a little hard to read the labels, but I guess the point is that there are a lot of places out there that have non-tariff barriers and large tariffs that make it hard for American workers to sell stuff to foreign countries and earn a good living. And that's exactly what the president's been talking about, especially over the last week. You know, we've got a hard deadline that's coming up that's going to, I think, be great news for markets once they see the clarity about how reasonable it is to have reciprocal tariffs. There are a heck of a lot of countries that play by the rules, where we have big trade surpluses with the country because they're playing by the rules and don't tariff our products. And then there are a few, just a few really, where the trade deficits are huge, they're persistent, they last for years. They're doing things like sending autos into the U.S. but not letting our autos go to their countries, and doing it in a way that harms American workers. And so there's a lot of work to be done. But the bottom line for me, Joe, is that I was just looking at the Customs and Border Patrol data for March, for the first week of March. And do you realize that if you run it out over 10 years, the amount of tariff revenue that we've already collected for the actions that we've taken, including some that you just mentioned, adds up to about $1 trillion over 10 years. $1 trillion that we could use to, say, give everybody a tax cut or reduce the deficit. And so that $1 trillion is part of the story, right? So what you're seeing right now is when people are naysayers and getting all upset about, oh, market this, market that, tax hikes, they're thinking that the $1 trillion is just going to go away. But President Trump's plan is to use the tariff revenue to balance the budget
like a tax,
and to reduce taxes.
That's from us. If let's say China goes down half, or some people, let's say they respond, but the other half is going to be people here raising prices for Americans, right? So that's okay.
If I charge a tax to Joe, then Joe pays the tax mostly. If I charge a tax to a Chinese exporter, then maybe there's a price effect on Joe, but you know the Chinese exporter is going to pay some tax too. So on net, logically, you got to be better off if you're running the tax through inelastically supplying foreign national. And so the president's vision is just, let's use the tariff revenue by making tariffs free or fair and reciprocal, and use that revenue to lower taxes on ordinary Americans and balance the budget.
Kevin, this is a really important point. I don't know if you just heard, Ed Yardeni was with us.
Oh, sure.
He's actually
Old
taking
friend,
Ed, he's taking down his S&P target for the year because of tariffs entirely. He's bringing it down to by about 9% from 7,000 to 6,400. Now, 6,400 is still a long way higher from where we are today at 56 and change. But he said without the tariffs, markets would be at new highs right now. And the last thing he said before he left the set just now is that if tariffs are here as a negotiation to try and make sure that we are getting fairer trade, that's one thing. But if the administration is looking at this as a way of raising revenue, as you just laid out, to replace personal and corporate taxes, he said that he does not agree with at all, and he thinks we'll have more negative impacts on the markets. What would you say to him? Because what you just laid out sounds like this is a long-term structural change where you're planning on getting revenue from this, and that's going to be something for not just the markets, but for businesses to try and contend with.
Right. You know, there's a lot to unpack, but look at it this way. Ed, I'm sure you're still listening, that we've got persistent trade deficits with Europe and with China and with South Korea that have been there for year after year after year. And if you look at why those trade deficits exist, it's because they have non-tariff barriers and high tariffs that make it hard for U.S. Firms to compete. Now, if you think that they're going to reduce all those barriers right away, then you think that this is a negotiation that's going to end, I guess Ed thinks ends well. Our expectation is there are going to be a lot of countries that do respond favorably to President Trump's negotiation. President Trump is very flexible. He said that over and over. But my guess is there are going to be a lot of countries that don't, that they're stuck in their ways. And the countries that don't are going to have to pay the tariffs, right? That's the way it is. And so I think there will be revenue. And we're already seeing it. If you think about it, the increase in the tariff on China to 20% has produced an enormous revenue burst for the U.S. over the last month. And it doesn't feel like China is really going to change very much. And the China deficit is what, about a third or 40% of the overall deficit. And so that right there is revenue that we could use to cut taxes on ordinary Americans.
You know, Kevin, as for bringing a lot of the manufacturing back here, that just, you know, Americans are so, we like instant gratification. So, I mean, isn't there anything faster than a microwave? I mean, I'm waiting and waiting, like, oh my God, 30 seconds, you know, to cook it. Well, that was from Homer. He's like, don't, is there anything faster than a mic? But I don't think you'd see the effects of this in terms of, you know, suddenly Michigan or Ohio or any of those great states that lost so many industries. That won't be back for years, even if you do try to do these things.
I thought that too, Joe, but then I was fiddling with the data as we're getting ready to meet with the president and vice president last week. And one of the things I noticed was that the capacity utilization rate for autos in the U.S. was around 80% pre-COVID under President Trump, and it's around 60% now. And so one reason why we had 9,000 auto jobs created in the last jobs report is that we've got all this excess capacity in auto manufacturing in the U.S. And so as we go towards reciprocal trade, I really expect that there are going to be tens of thousands of auto jobs created this year, and you already saw it in the last month because capacity utilization is so low. So Joe Biden let, like many other things, the auto industry get out of control, and President Trump is out there fixing it.
So as far as the reciprocal tariffs are one thing, is there any softening on some of the positions on tariffs that don't seem to have a clear rationale, and that critics, and there are many across the board, you see it, Kevin, that say it's, you know, we're not really sure what it's going to be. It changes by the hour. Ed Yardeni said the market seems to go up on days when, you know, we haven't heard new utterances about tariffs.
I think there should be clarity, absolute clarity. The president is clear that we're going to have reciprocal.
Getting it now?
Well, yeah, I mean, April 2nd, you're going to see the reciprocal tariffs. Between now and then, we've been in a negotiation with flexibility with Mexico and Canada, and we've got the border under control, and we're making a huge amount of progress on fentanyl. Those have both been very positive developments that were related to the tariff policy. But yeah, absolutely, between now and April 2nd, there'll be some uncertainty, but as April comes along, markets will see that the reciprocal trade policy makes a great deal of sense, and that for a lot of countries, they play by the rules. They're not going to be very upset at all at the way that the U.S. moves.
Which countries are best positioned, do you think, to go I probably can't go person to person with the United States? I mean, China probably doesn't need to fear us as much as maybe, I don't know, some countries that aren't economic powerhouses. But even China, I would think, doesn't need to be doesn't need to exacerbate the situation, especially if they know there's certain things that they're doing that an objective person would say is unfair.
Right. Well, I think that what's going on, right, is that China is subsidizing production and selling stuff to U.S. consumers in order to create political stability at home. even if they lose money on that subsidized production. And so China's doing that. I think that Europe for sure does that. And after that, we could go down the list. But I think that there are a couple of countries that are basically addicted to subsidized jobs that they subsidize, on the back of the U.S. consumer. I think there are a heck of a lot of countries that just play by the rules, that don't have tariffs, that don't have non-tariff barriers, that have trade surpluses with the U.S. And I think that if you're trying to think, we don't have to go through the list. We'll have a list for you on the 2nd of April. But if you go through the list, you're going to see there are a heck of a lot of countries that are performing very, very well. They respect the rules. They're great allies, and they're not, playing favorites.
Just even China, though, I would think, like I said, I don't know who can really decide to make this protracted, and I think we should see some movement. Maybe that's what the president is counting on. Maybe then it won't be such a long process. We got 15 seconds. I got to go. Thanks, Kevin Hassett.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Thanks, Vic.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, when we come back.